Franklin Richards is one of the most enigmatic and powerful characters of Marvel. He's a child born out of science with powers that are quite frankly god-level. For years and years, he's been known as an Omega-level mutant, quite literally one of the crown jewels of XMen, and considered to be the future of mutantkind. But then in 2018, things changed. One single issue rewrote decades of lore. Franklin was declared not to be a mutant. This retcon not only confused fans, but it also led to a lot of debates about power, intent, and identity. So sit down, get comfy, and let's get down to business to understand what this little retconning means for X-Men, Marvel's multiverse, and of course, Fantastic Four. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. Who is Franklin Richards? Franklin Benjamin Richards is not a typical Marvel character, but then again, he was never meant to be. He's the son of Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and Susan Storm, Invisible Woman, and inadvertently, he was born into greatness. He's the first biological child of the core Fantastic Four members. His birth was considered to be a monumental moment in the Marvel Universe, not just because he's the son of Reed and Sue, but because of what he represented. He's the fusion of cosmic potential, science, and heroism. Franklin was unique because of the way the writers treated his origin. His birth story was not the simplest. Sue went through pregnancy complications because of cosmic radiation, and the fact that Franklin existed defied biological logic. So, knowing that, Reed had to call in help from literally the Watcher to save both his wife and unborn child. The cosmic-level pregnancy was foreshadowing that Franklin was more than just another powerful kid. He was destined for greatness through and through. Even when he was a toddler, Franklin was able to use his reality-warping powers. In his early issues, his abilities were so intense that Franklin was often put into a self-induced coma or dampened his powers to ensure the world was safe. Unlike Jean Grey, another Omega-level mutant in the X-Men series, who developed her powers over time and reached the godlike level, Franklin, much like Lady Gaga would say, was born this way. As a child, Franklin often showed up in Fantastic Four comics with his parents, and then eventually he teamed up with Power Pack, becoming an honorary member. These appearances showed his more human side, with Franklin being playful, childlike, and curious about friendship. But the undercurrent of his being immensely powerful remained, even if he didn't understand it himself. One of the most famous arcs of Franklin has to be during the crossover events of Days of Future Present, where the older version of Franklin comes from a dystopian future. And in this story, we learn that Franklin is not just a time traveler, he is a time nexus. In that timeline, the one the older Franklin is from, he's a powerful figure and is deeply tied to the collapsing and rebuilding of reality, so he teams up with Nathaniel Richards and Rachel Summers to form this trio of powerful legacy heroes. But the most defining moment has to be in the Heroes Reborn, where, after the massive Onslaught event, many of Earth's heroes were wiped out. As a result of that, Franklin created a pocket universe to store and preserve them, subconsciously, might I add, just because he could. And this reality was not an illusion or a hallucination. It was a functioning dimension where events played out for months. This single act proved that Franklin wasn't just a powerful child. He was among the most powerful beings in existence, because this feat was on par with beings like the Beyonder and Eternity. His legacy continued through arcs of Secret Wars, Fantastic Force, and Future Foundation. In each arc, we saw older versions of Franklin collaborate with cosmic entities and rebuild the multiverse together. In these arcs in particular, Franklin was often portrayed as this reluctant god who was weighed down by what he could do and the morality of whether he should do it or not. The best way to describe Franklin Richards would be to call him Marvel's eternal child god. He represents untapped potential, the existential dread of wielding unimaginable power while they do not quite understand its full consequences, and moral conflict. Number 2. What are Franklin's powers and why is he so important? Even though Franklin Richards was a mutant, his abilities have always been more than just mutant abilities. His powers are reality-defying and cosmic in nature. Describing his skill set is hard because you're trying to categorize a god using the rules of humans. But Marvel has tried several times to pin down what Franklin can actually do, and let me tell you, the list is staggering. His famous ability is reality warping. Franklin can manipulate reality on a universal and multiversal scale. He can reshape existence, create life, and forge entire pocket universes. He can also undo apocalyptic events. Very few people in the Marvel Universe can rival this, like the Living Tribunal, Eternity, the Beyonder, and Galactus. But despite that, sometimes Franklin becomes part of that cool group and surpasses them by a long shot. On the other hand, Franklin also has shown telepathic and telekinetic abilities. He can communicate across dimensions, move objects with just a thought, and even influence other people. His psionic abilities are on par with those of Jean Grey, Charles Xavier, and Emma Frost. While that makes him dangerous, it also means he is perceptive to cosmic threats. His senses catch the event before it happens, and that's why he can show up and prevent those issues. He can also manipulate energy and matter on a molecular level. He can conjure things, resurrect characters, and even alter his own age. In various alternate futures, these powers are so refined that he's the one governing the galaxies. A particular alternate version of Franklin, whom we're introduced to in the Fantastic Four at the end, is literally a god who restores peace to the universe. In Future Foundation, we see an older Franklin joining hands with Galactus. First, he succeeds the Devourer of Worlds, and then becomes a new cosmic entity himself. All these stories position Franklin as not just a hero, but also a cornerstone of all existence as we know it. Now we come to the House of X. Jonathan Hickman literally mentioned Franklin as one of the confirmed Omega-level mutants. Now, in case you don't know, Omega mutants are individuals whose power know no bounds. Franklin was literally classified with Jean Grey and Quentin Quire. This position meant he was someone whose potential knew no bounds and that he was also a strategic asset in mutant politics, something we'll circle back to soon. Overall, you can say that Franklin is the symbol of limitless potential that is restrained by nothing other than human emotions. His own moral compass guides where his powers would be used and where they would not. That makes him an interesting character to follow and an irreplaceable one in the Marvel mythos. Number 3. Franklin and the X-Men, a complicated relationship. With Jonathan Hickman mentioning his name in the Omega-level mutants list, you would assume that Franklin's ties with the X-Men were smooth sailing, but that has never been the case. In reality, his relationship with the X-Men can be best described as this strange and emotional balancing act. See, he was never raised among mutants. He lived in the Baxter Building, not the Xavier Institute. But owing to how powerful he is and his mutant classification, he could never truly be too far away from Xavier's radar. With the Days of Future Present arc, Franklin was now officially and directly tied to the X-Men's fate. Despite coming from an unknown future, Franklin is treated as one of their own by Rachel Summers and the New Mutants. He shared his trauma with the X-Men, especially with Rachel, as she too is from an alternate dimension. So in a way, in this arc, you could say that Franklin got the true mutant brethren vibes from Rachel and the New Mutants. Now, when we talk about mutants, there's no way we couldn't bring up Xavier himself. Franklin's relationship with Xavier has never been easy. Xavier always saw him as a force that needed to be monitored and feared at all times. And can you truly blame him? In alternate futures like House of M and Age of Apocalypse, Franklin is either the Deus Ex Machina or the wild card. His allegiance is never clear, and that's what makes him so fascinating. One wrong move by Franklin and suddenly your entire universe simply ceases to exist. Then the tipping point came with the Fantastic Four X-Men miniseries. As the sovereign mutant nation was formed, KCOA sought out all powerful mutants to live among them. Franklin was considered to be one of those must-have mutants. In fact, Emma Frost and Magneto went out to invite him. KCOA offered Franklin a home where he could truly be himself, a place with freedom and understanding. He no longer had to hide. On the surface, this was an outreach move, but under the surface, this looked like a recruitment, to be honest. And Reed, he didn't like it one bit. He saw it as a threat. So he secretly programmed a blocker that would hide away Franklin's DNA, making it impossible for Cerebro to detect him as a mutant. This was an act that shocked a lot of the fans, and Krakoans were infuriated with this behavior. This inevitably fractured the relationship between the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. And honestly, can you blame them? Now, when this event went down, the fan reaction was mixed, to say the least. Some fans felt like this was the right move. KCOA provided Franklin with the space that he needed, something he deserved. However, others thought that the whole outreach was nothing more than a gesture to treat Franklin like a trophy. And that, of course, is not right. He is a person, and he deserves to be treated as such. Reed, on the other hand, acted like a jealous control freak, according to fans, which created a bigger mess than he had originally set out to. In this arc, Franklin's internal conflict peaked, and he didn't know where he belonged anymore. His identity was crumbling, and everyone around him, his family and the mutant nation, both saw him as a strategic asset instead of a person, which is not good. In the end, he decided to stay with the Fantastic Four, but by that time, the damage had already been done. This arc proved to everyone, including Franklin, that he was too mutant for humans and too human for mutants. This effectively put him in an existential limbo. Number 4. The Retcon. Is Franklin still a mutant? In the 26th issue of Fantastic Four, written by Dan Slott, we got to see the most shocking twist of them all. Franklin Richards, someone we've known for a long time as an Omega-level mutant, was suddenly not a mutant at all. In this issue, we were told that Franklin's mutation was not natural. Rather, his powers of reality warping were so strong that they convinced him and everyone else, including Professor X, Cerebro, and Emma Frost, that he was a mutant. According to this narrative, Franklin just really wanted to be a mutant, and so he became one by willing it into existence. This narrative bomb changed everything. After years of Franklin being known as a mutant, his inclusion in House of X's Omega-level mutant list, and his entire conflict with Krakoa, everything was suddenly invalidated. And Cerebro, as it turns out, was never able to detect Franklin properly simply because he's not a mutant genetically. He was, for the lack of a better word, an imposter. And once this truth came out, Xavier's response was swift and cold. Franklin was immediately removed from the mutant registry. There was no explanation or fanfare, he was simply cut off, like he never belonged there in the first place. Dan Slott tried to explain the retcon away by stating that he wanted to focus on Franklin's personal identity. He wanted to explore with this arc what it would be like to lose something that you believe had defined you for years. In interviews, he stated that this was not a mutant lore takedown, but an opportunity for Franklin to understand who he was without the label of mutant stamped on his forehead. Are you buying this? Yeah, me neither. And neither did the majority of fans. They lashed out against the writer, and the backlash was brutal. A lot of fans speculated that this whole thing was an editorial sabotage, while others felt like maybe Marvel's X-Office and Fantastic Four editorial team were not aligned, which led to this abrupt ending. Comic enthusiasts have taken to YouTube to break down this narrative, as this retcon feels both narratively empty and politically regressive. Franklin's status as a mutant was all about inclusion, and by this retcon, suddenly he is no longer included, effectively sending the opposite message. Fans also feel like this was another example of Marvel's inconsistent treatment of its minority-coded characters. We all know that mutants are an allegory for marginalized identities. So what does it mean in the grand scheme, now that one of the most powerful mutants has been retconned out of existence? Others also thought about the symbolic meaning of the story. Franklin was idolized by both communities, and now he was rejected by both simply because his biology didn't fit the right boxes. In one of the most heart-wrenching panels, we see Franklin ask his father if he's still special after getting rejected by Krakoa. Reed tries to reassure his boy, but the emotional damage is done. For Franklin, this mutant identity was a belief, a connection to a broader community, and now this community no longer wanted him. This retcon not only changes Franklin's origin, but it also challenges the very foundation of mutant identity in the Marvel Universe. Suddenly, it feels like X-Men's utopia has become obsessed with purity, and that's never a good look. Number 5. Fallout in comics. Where is Franklin now? So after this shocking retcon, Franklin Richards has undergone this quiet and emotional fallout across Marvel Comics. He is no longer considered a mutant, and he's no longer welcome on Krakoa. And on top of that, because of his emotional state, his power started to fade. Franklin is now back where he started, but somehow nothing is the same. According to the 2021 Fantastic Four issues, Franklin can only access his full power one day a year. On that day, he becomes the god-tier reality manipulator he used to be, but for the rest of the year, he's just a super intelligent but powerless teenager. This artificial limitation feels more emotional and symbolic than scientific. You could say this is a metaphor for growing up and letting go, finally coming to terms with change. And even though it's been a while, the rejection from Krakoa has left a scar on him. He has said in multiple conversations with Ben Grimm that he feels like he was a part of something bigger, and now suddenly he doesn't know where he fits. The Fantastic Four, to their credit, has done a wonderful job embracing Franklin and accepting him for who he is. Valeria helps him cope in the simplest way possible. Reed, on the other hand, became more protective, while Sue stands by him without question, even though he can do nothing to truly fix the problem. In the 2022-2023 run of the Fantastic Four, Franklin returned in a more background role. He goes on missions and offers input, but he's no longer the center of attention. His grand arcs are gone. He's just a teenager who wants to reclaim his sense of self. Now, this whole arc is particularly poignant simply because of how invisible Franklin has become in the overall Marvel Universe. He hasn't shown up in major crossovers or been tapped for Krakoan diplomacy. Since his removal, he's not interacted with an X-Man either. So it feels like even the Marvel Universe as a whole has placed him in a narrative quarantine. Fans understandably lament his isolation. Some users feel that Franklin is being depowered and kicked out, and Marvel simply doesn't know what to do with him anymore. Instead of using him as the bridge between X-Men and Fantastic Four, Marvel simply opted to burn that bridge down. But that doesn't mean that Franklin was completely adrift. In the recent Fantastic Four annual, it was hinted that Franklin's powers may be evolving into something entirely new. But until we see it in print, Franklin's story is one about resilience. He went from a child god to just a teen, and this is probably the most human we've ever seen him. Number 6. What does it mean for mutant lore and Krakoa? Franklin Richards being removed from mutantkind is not just a personal change for Franklin. It's also a huge change in the philosophy of what it means to be a mutant, and it also raises a few questions about the Krakoan era of X-Men. First up, we have Cerebro. So this is an infallible, powerful psychic machine. It can detect, catalog, and even resurrect every mutant on Earth. Franklin not only slipped past its filters for years, but it turns out Cerebro was wrong about Franklin completely, simply because of his reality-warping powers working subconsciously. If Cerebro can be fooled by a child's thoughts, you gotta wonder what else it makes mistakes about. Could it be that Cerebro also misidentified other non-mutants? Or could it erase actual mutants? But that's not what shocked me the most. What shocked me the most was how the mutant nation reacted. When Xavier and the Quiet Council found out Franklin was not a true mutant, he was excommunicated. This makes you wonder how inclusive KCOA really is. Is KCOA working only on genetic purity? Is there no room for legacy and found families? For some fans, this moment served as a grim commentary about KCOA as a nation. Franklin getting kicked out was a metaphor for all kinds of exclusionary ideologies, and Franklin was a scapegoat, proving to everyone that what was once utopian is now authoritarian. Others feel like this decision was never about Franklin at all. Maybe the editorial offices, being all independent, simply did not want to put the extra work to manage his narrative. But that's a bad thing too, because now we know that even the strongest mutant can be simply erased because their existence is now inconvenient. And for the broader Marvel universe, Franklin's exile feels like a slap to the face of the idea that identity can be chosen or earned. This boy spent his entire life believing he was one of them. He fought alongside them. He mourned their deaths. He suffered for their cause. But now, just because his genetics didn't align properly, none of it matters. And that's not right. Number 7. What about the MCU? Will Franklin be a mutant there? Things are not looking good for our boy Franklin in the comic universe, that's for sure. But in the cinematic universe, things are a little different. The first real hint about Franklin we see is in the post-credit scene of Fantastic Four: The First Steps, where Reed and Sue have a baby named Franklin. Since we don't see any of the cosmic radiation bit, I have a feeling that Franklin will probably appear in future storylines with a new origin and role. So far, the MCU has kept any news about Franklin under wraps. However, there are strong hints that he will probably be a multiversal being because in many interviews, we've seen Kevin Feige hinting that Franklin and the other beings like him play a key role in the upcoming Secret Wars event. This is supposed to collapse and rebuild the multiverse completely, just like Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars did in 2015. In this comic arc, we saw Franklin and Molecule Man working together with Reed Richards to reassemble the multiverse. If the Marvel Cinematic Universe tries to adapt even a fraction of that story, Franklin would be essential to it. Now, the reason this might work out is that they could simply pose Franklin as an anomaly instead of a mutant. So that way, the MCU would be able to bring Franklin into the world, but sidestep the whole political argument altogether. And in the long run, that kinda makes sense. The MCU has definitely leaned into the celestial mythos by introducing the Eternals, so you could imagine Franklin being introduced in the MCU as someone related to the Celestials or even eternity itself. Some fans theorize that maybe the MCU will treat him as a cosmic convergence point. You know, someone born during a very specific multiversal alignment. That would go well with the MCU themes of incursions, nexus beings, and timelines collapsing. Or maybe he would be introduced in late Secret Wars to rebuild reality like the Deus Ex Machina he is. So in a way, Franklin would symbolize the rebirth of the MCU's next phase. But amidst all of that, you gotta wonder what it would mean if the MCU decided to go down that path. Is Marvel Studios deliberately ignoring the complicated KCOA arc by refusing to acknowledge the Mutant Association? Or is there something else? Either way, one thing we know for sure is that Franklin would not be ignored in the MCU, and he's bound to be one of the most important puzzle pieces of Marvel's live-action multiverse. Number 8. Franklin's goals, struggles, and personal arc. Underneath all the arcs, powers, and explosions, Franklin is just a boy. He's a hero raised by a family of scientists, a god in a child's body, and a supposed mutant who never met his people. What Franklin wants the most is a normal life, and that's what makes it so sad. From the very beginning, he wanted to be a normal kid. Go to school, make friends, explore the world. But that dream was never achieved because of his abilities. Whenever Franklin tried to have a normal life, he was pulled into some grand scheme. His struggle represents the classic Chosen One dilemma. He seeks acceptance and a place to belong. And now, with the rejection from KCOA, he's broken. The loss of KCOA is huge, and one could say this parallels the emotional arc of adolescence. Now Franklin is a teenager, and he's starting to understand the complexity of identity. He doesn't know who he is anymore, and in my eyes, it's a coming-of-age story for him. As sad as this arc may be, this also gave Franklin the most agency. This journey hurts, but it feels real. Now Franklin is something more than a plot device. He's now someone trying to fix himself instead of the multiverse. Marvelous verdict. Since the day he was born, Reed Richards has been many things. Prodigy, God, mutant messiah, but now he gets to be what he wants to be. With Marvel retconning his mutant identity, Franklin is now in a limbo, mirroring the journey all of us went through as teens. This retcon rippled through the entire narrative of the Marvel Universe, which means that we have quite a few doors open. Will Franklin find a place among the heroes? Will he go back to his Omega roots? Or will he redefine himself entirely? In my eyes, Franklin will probably learn to accept himself and make an identity for himself, whatever it may be, and that self-love would lead to him getting back his powers, allowing him to be the hero he always saw himself as. So he may not be a mutant, and he doesn't have to be, because Franklin Richards will always be extraordinary. Let us know what you guys think about the retcon and what you think might happen to Franklin in the future down below in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!